So it was just announced that on May 7th, Canelo Alvarez will be moving up to 175 pounds to challenge Dmitry Bivol for Bivol's version of a light heavyweight title. And seeing this announced today, it's actually the first time I've felt genuinely excited about a forthcoming boxing match in at least the last year or two. If you were to ask me a year ago what fights I would like to see made, just underneath Errol Spence Jr. versus Terrence Crawford, this would have been my second or third pick. Now, there are a few unknowns at this point that might actually affect my set in stone prediction of a winner. Number one, even though this fight is officially going to be contested for Bivol's 175-pound light heavyweight title, it is still possible that the fight could be contested at a catch weight. You have to remember, because Canelo is the number one A-list moneymaker in the sport, he can make virtually any stipulation that he wants at the bargaining table. And so Dmitry Bivol had previously said that he was capable of getting down to 168 pounds. And so even if that was true, that is not something that he should have said publicly, because he just gave tremendous bargaining power to the Canelo team. And back in August, there was a preliminary discussion which stated that Bivol and Canelo were going to fight at 172 pounds. And so I don't know to what extent that would actually hinder Bivol's performance. It may be true that he could comfortably fluctuate between 168 and 175. But I would be less comfortable predicting Bivol at actually achieving an upset if he has to come in at a reduced weight. Now, if you're one of the boxing fans who has never seen Dmitry Bivol fight, you are depriving yourself, especially if you're someone who just really appreciates craftsmanship and highly skilled boxing. If I were to try to describe Bivol's style, I would describe him as a slightly more defensive Gennady Golovkin or a Kostya Tszyu. He has a very aggressive yet intelligent Eastern European style. Looking at Canelo's fight against Gennady Golovkin, what really interests me about this matchup is everything that Golovkin was able to do well against Canelo, Bivol does a little bit better. Golovkin was not really successful against Canelo, being super aggressive, backing him up, or trying to land huge power punches. By far the most effective punch that Golovkin landed against Canelo was a ramrod left jab. And Dmitry Bivol's style is very similar to Golovkin's in the sense that he's brilliant at measuring distance. He never punches when he's out of position, and Bivol is actually very rarely successfully counterpunched. And another interesting fact is that statistically, Bivol tends to have one of the highest percentages in terms of outlanding his opponents. It's not unusual for him to outland his opponents 4 or 5 to 1. That is incredibly rare when you're talking about the highest level of the sport. Dmitry Bivol's two best or most noteworthy opponents to date were probably Joe Smith Jr. and Sullivan Barrera. And in each of those fights, he actually outlanded them about 5 to 1. It reminded me a little bit of the numbers Errol Spence produced when he fought Mikey Garcia and outpunched him something like 350 to 70. Bivol is one of the 2 or 3 most efficient, technically brilliant boxer punchers in the world today. So my preliminary prediction, before we learn about any fine details in the last negotiations of the fight, like whether the fight will happen at a catch weight, I am comfortable at this moment predicting, I believe Dmitry Bivol is going to get the best of Canelo Alvarez in a very technically brilliant, tightly contested, competitive fight. I believe Bivol, because of his greatest strengths, his ability to control distance, the strength of his jab, his ability to only punch when he's in position. Canelo is a brilliant counterpuncher, but Bivol is very difficult to land counterpunches against. I believe Bivol will be able to replicate the portions of Canelo's fights with Gennady Golovkin, where Golovkin was most successful. I think Bivol will be able to control Canelo with a jab. I think he will be successful at controlling the distance, affirming his ring generalship, and I could see Bivol legitimately winning a good 8 or 9 out of 12 rounds. Of course, we can't predict how the judges will actually score the fight because they're human beings and you can't predict human behavior. I'm not going to suggest necessarily that Bivol will deservedly win and then be robbed of the decision, because you just never know in that regard. You remember when Timothy Bradley got the decision against Manny Pacquiao in a fight where everyone, ringside experts and fans alike, all thought Pacquiao deserved the decision. So I won't necessarily say it will be a robbery, but I believe that Bivol will narrowly get the best of Canelo and that he will deserve the decision. Will the judges score it that way? Who knows? But we still have a lot of room to change our positions over the next couple of months leading up to the fight. I'm interested in hearing how you feel about it. If you agree, disagree, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section.